that's a completely unacceptable drag. So, there are folks that kind of sit in this I need ACLs to all the way to the server, very locked down approach, and that's just that's breaking. There's the other crew, which I actually went in. It's actually a potential customer that gave this name. So I run my data center like a mosh pit. Everything can talk to everything as long as if they can get through the outside wall. And they are keenly aware. So they have 800 pinholes in their firewall right now. Mm-hmm. This vast number, and this is their externally facing firewall. And they're just vastly aware that this is a huge. Well, they've gotten some leg up on the manageability. They've paid a massive price on the granularity. So, I think of a couple of benefits of OpenFlow, but one of the benefits that at least that we're really focusing on is this concept of virtual networks. Can I create a virtual network that really contains only the servers that I care about? Can that be managed by people who are really experts in this particular, whether it's this department that needs a virtual network or this application that needs a virtual network? So we kind of think that this is a bit the opportunity to actually get kind of the upside of these very, very highly locked down networks, but really manageability at scale that's required in server virtualization, and at speed to really do this well.
I think that's a great model. I've seen some models where certain vendors are saying, hey, just the server administrator just needs to drag it into the clouds, and some clouds can talk to other clouds in their interface. And I think it's something that when we're trying to do rapid provisioning, that makes it easy. Yeah. I'm wondering beyond that, when I think of software-defined networking, I kind of see that this idea of, it's kind of unfortunate that a lot of the network's benefits and services are going away in a lot of environments, because what happens a lot of times when you have vulnerabilities is that a host becomes compromised. If you don't have that per host ACL, then all of a sudden that host has access to the rest of the hosts in the mosh pit, right? And then the organization gets in a bit of trouble there. And so in OpenFlow right now, it's defining the interface between the controller and the network operator and the network forwarding hardware. Beyond that, I'd like to see a day come where applications, that northbound interface is standardized and robust, where application, and because it's standardized, every application can write to that API and say, hey, here's exactly what I need, network. You do the security, quality, performance, and that happens automatically. I mean, do you see that happening?
Let me give you a sense just right outside here on the show floor. We're actually showing a REST API controlling forwarding in the network.
Nice.
I think there are two pieces there. First of all, you need software that is flexible enough to keep up with modern APIs and kind of all the infrastructure components that come with keeping up to date there. So you need a software architecture that's flexible enough to do that. You also really need a set of primitives about what does your data model about a network look like that's both solid enough and simple enough to make it very, very practical for developers to write applications that straddle an application running in the IT ecosystem and the network of the IT ecosystem. And so that for us is part of what drives our thinking around what and how we need to expose the innards of our controller data structures.
So, now I don't know what you can talk about and can't talk about today. Obviously, you're demonstrating some of your features on the show floor today. So, in terms of primitives, what type of fundamentally different approaches are you taking we expect to see in your initial controller release? I think some intelligent load balancing, multipathing, controller-based model. What other cool features do you see?
Let me tell you about what I think is going to be for us the really, really interesting feature. And it's more than the feature. For us, it's actually a full-fledged application. We like to think of it as the VMware for networking. Mm-hmm. We have this concept of an architect that can pick 2 ports from here, 3 ports from over there, 5 ports from another switch, roll them all together with a username and a password, and delegate that out to an administrator who logs in, and to that administrator, this thing just looks and feels like a single switch. Now, the ports can be very, very widely distributed. Some of these ports may even, say port 3 is attached to, rather than saying a physical port 3 is attached to a VM named payment server. If the payment server moves around, well, the architect might know that, but from the administrator's perspective, it's just always plugged into port 3. So this separation of saying, hey, the administrator actually gets a virtual, their virtual network is one big switch.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective because one of the things the ways that a lot of the traditional networking companies are trying to tackle this is rather than looking at a new way of doing things, or maybe in addition to, they're saying that keep your traditional static network policy, and we'll have it automatically follow your device around as vMotion moves or what have you as we move into stateless environments. And I like that idea that as it moves, it may move physically around the network, but it still appears to be on the same switch port. I mean, that would have tremendous implications on operations.
It's sort of just as sort of the old meets new. Let's take the old concept of a switch and let's keep it.
Very cool. So how do you see the... Actually, let me take a step back. You mentioned earlier about industry with a mainframe mentality, and the fact that the network industry has been very vertically integrated. OpenFlow is a step to get there, but at the end of the day, you still have you don't have the standards around. One, I'm curious about developing directly on a controller, and then beyond that, the northbound APIs. I guess on one level, what are you doing with the APIs? But then beyond that, where do you think the standards are going with the APIs and development environment for network operating systems?
To me, I think the best answer for that, the OpenFlow standard followed only after OpenFlow had actually already been implemented and rolled out in several buildings at Stanford and several other campuses as well. I think it was actually rolled out on 8 campuses before the standard was even drafted. So I think about it less, I don't think about let's build a standard and then let's build products second. I think more let's build really good products, right? Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Some of these are going to be incredibly useful for end customers, and those are the ones that we want to standardize. So I see very much the standards process of, the standards process gets to sort of pick and choose, especially on the northbound API front. Hey, here are some really, really useful things that are getting built. Now let's standardize those.
And I kind of like this idea of, moving forward. I mean, the standardization process can really slow growth. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of arguing, and I like the way that a lot of the standards are being in the open source movement is go do it, open it up, let other people contribute. It still may not have as many sources of control or input, but at least it's making progress, and it may become more of a de facto standard. At the end of the day, the market needs some level of standardization, and sometimes it's best to let the market decide, so we can continue to make progress rather than fighting and bickering. So how do you see the market being disrupted? I mean, what do you see as initial applications for OpenFlow?
I think for us, I look at, specifically for us, I look at the sort of the one big switch, the network virtualization piece, as being, in my mind, for our company, that's kind of where we expect the first real adoption of OpenFlow to happen in the enterprise data center. Right? Campus lane we can also talk about. The enterprise data center is something that we see as folks who are making this transition from enterprise data center to private cloud. Right? And for us, it's less of a technology transition and more of an org chart transition. It says, hey, rather than one team doing everything, there should be a small central team that effectively creates a large number of self-service tools that look a lot like Amazon EC2. Hey, you want 10 VMs? Great. Here you go. Knock yourself out. If you get yourself all in a tangle, your problem. Right now, the issue that we see is folks kind of make this transition over to private cloud. On the compute side, it says, okay, wow, you want 10 VMs? Great. Here you go. Go to town. And now let's take some really mundane examples. Just go and say within there somebody flips on Windows Load Balancer. Now, all of a sudden, amongst their VMs, they're now actually flooding broadcast traffic all the way across the network, and suddenly they're no longer being a good neighbor. It doesn't take very many of those